Thank you for joining us for this session of the North Central Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Center webinar series, presented to you by the National AgrAbility Project at Purdue University. Our topic today is on rural caregiving and mental health. Everyone needs to be included in the conversation. And our presenter today, Bridget Britton from Ohio State University Extension. And I will introduce her in just a minute. For those not familiar with USDA's Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network, commonly known as FARSAN, it was established through the Farm Bill of 2008, and its purpose is to provide a nationwide network for people in agriculture that might be experiencing stress of one type or another. There are 4 FARSAN regions and also 4 FARSAN centers covering every U.S. state and territory. If you'd like more information about how to contact those centers, you can check agrability.info/FARSAN. And that's agrability.info in this case, not agrability.org. agrability.info/FARSAN. For those not familiar with AgrAbility, we are a USDA-sponsored group, also through the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, that focuses on helping people in agriculture that have some type of disability. There are currently 21 state projects, and each of those is a partnership between a land-grant university and at least one nonprofit disability services organization. There's also one National AgrAbility project. Again, that's here at Purdue University through the Breaking New Ground Resource Center. And our partners on that grant include Goodwill of the Finger Lakes, Osteoarthritis Action Alliance, AgriSafe Network, Colorado State University, and Washington State University. You can find out more about AgrAbility and access many of our resources on agrability.org, including more than 150 archived webinars that you can view at your convenience. Our presenter today is Bridget Britton, and she is the Behavioral Health Field Specialist for Ohio State University Extension. In this position, she works to bring wellness awareness on suicide prevention, mental health wellness, and specifically farm stress. She's worked with OSU Extension for 6 years in a variety of capacities. And she is also a licensed social worker in the state of Ohio and has over 10 years experience in the field. She's worked in foster care and adoption, in mental health case management, as a therapist, and as an adjunct professor. Bridget is also trained in a variety of mental health intervention strategies, including adult, youth, and teen mental health first aid, QPR, which refers to question, persuade, and refer, and trauma-informed care. At this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn things over to Bridget for the main part of our presentation, and I plan to return during the Q&A period.
All right, thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for having me today. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. I want to thank everybody for having me today. This is a topic that I am very passionate about. I actually was hired in on our Ohio State Extension FARSAN grant. So I'm really excited to be here and represent Ohio State Extension's FARSAN farm stress team today. But this is a little shift in focus from what I typically talk about, which is, of course, suicide prevention and education, though this is a vein of suicide awareness and education, right? Because if we didn't talk about something like self-care, it could lead us down other paths. And self-care is just something that I am a really big advocate for. And I don't think that it's something that is given enough attention until it is too late in the process, or until we really realize how important it is. So I am going to just jump right into my presentation, and we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about what self-care is, because I know in this audience of this size, or you might be thinking of somebody who may never heard of self-care before, Or you may be thinking, somebody in my family or a friend told me about this webinar, and, I didn't really think, that I might, be interested in this. And sometimes the word self-care can be elicit like a groan, like, oh, I don't really want to talk about this. And some people feel like, self-care is really the term has come out of the pandemic, or, you never really heard about it until recent years. But really it's been around a lot longer than what we think about. It just may have been called other things, right? So self-care in its truest form and definition is the practice of taking care, taking action to preserve or improve one's own mental or even physical health. There are studies that link together our mental and physical health. And so when we think about self-care, right, we're just taking care of ourselves. So kind of coining the term self-care, but really it's just taking care of ourselves. And so in recent years, it might have become a buzzword, so to say, but really that's what it truly is. And so I want to just take a poll, because I've done this training a lot with a variety of audiences. And I want to just see how many of you practice self-care. So we have a poll question that's going to come up, I think. Do you practice self-care? And it's just a simple yes or no. And there's no shame in whatever your answer is. But I'm always kind of curious, because in the past, I have taught this kind of educational program, and I literally had nobody raise their hand, right? I was in an audience and it was like 50 people, and everybody was like, no, I never, practice self-care, even though they knew what it was. So we have 100% answer. And if we're able to share that, we can end the poll and share. It looks like 80% of you practice self-care. So that's really great. And so I hope that today you will be able to get some ideas or take something to share with family and friends who maybe don't practice self-care, or make sure that you are, practicing on a regular basis, or, just getting new, refreshing ideas. So I want to talk a little bit about when to practice self-care, right? Ideally, we're doing it on a regular basis. We're not waiting until it's crunch time, until we're really feeling like we need to practice it, or until, we feel like we're completely drained to practice our self-care or take care of ourselves, right? We're recognizing some signs that we need to practice. And we're going to talk about those signs in just a minute, because I want you to start thinking already about when you realize you need to practice self-care. So the 80% of you that said, yes, I do practice self-care, I want you to think about how you know when you need to practice it. And then you definitely need to practice it when you're absolutely overwhelmed. So I will just share that you saw in my description of myself, my bio, that I am a licensed therapist. I don't practice anymore in my current role, but I am not so great at self-care, right? And the training that I taught this program at was like a conference, and it was the Ohio Rural Health conference, and everybody was like doctors and nurses, and all people that kind of talk about self-care and taking care of yourself, right? And that's where everybody was like, no, I don't practice self-care, right? They knew what it was, they knew how important it was, but they don't practice it. So we really got to practice what we preach. And so, I can recognize when I'm feeling absolutely overwhelmed, and then I need to practice it. But ideally, it's really a maintenance. So thinking about your car, or your tractor, or whatever that might look like, whatever an airplane. If you fly an airplane, I'm looking at a picture of an airplane that just happens to be in the room that I'm in. That's when you're practicing your self-care, right? You're going to take care of your car, you're going to take care of your tractor, your truck, whatever that looks like, and you're going to do the regular needed maintenance on it. And so thinking about that, if you can relate it together like that, I think it's really important. So I want to hear from you in the chat some signs that you need to practice self-care physically. What are some physical signs that you experience, right? Some of you may not experience any physical signs, but what are some things that you experience physically that let you know that you need to practice self-care? You could just type them in the chat. Fatigue, your heart's racing, you're tired, body aches, more frequently ill, yes. Exhaustion, insomnia, easily agitated, muscle tension, yeah. Nightmares, yeah. There's such a link to our physical health and wellness, right? Our immune system and our mental health and our wellness. I never used to get migraines until the last couple years. And it doesn't have anything to do with the stress of my job. It just has to do with the way that I took care of myself, right? Working in a field where you're constantly talking about suicide and death and trying to prevent that from happening can be very stressful. And knowing that I needed to take care of myself was very important. And somebody said, when I get sore muscles, I make sure to get massages, which insurance pays for. Yeah, we just got that kind of also benefit here at Ohio State Extension, which is really nice. So what are some emotional things that you experience? And some of you also put it in your chat. Oh, somebody said high blood sugar, which I never really thought of. What are some emotional signs that you need to take care of yourself? Frustration, easily frustrated. Yeah, my husband would tell me that. Crying, easy to cry, increased agitation, depression, more worried. What else? Anxiety, getting upset. Yeah, loss of empathy. That's a really good one. Not present. Absolutely. Loss of patience. I have that. I have a 4-year-old and I can tell when I'm losing my patience with him at unnecessary times, right? Because there's times that we're going to lose our patience or we're going to be distracted. That's just the nature of being a human being, right? But I'm losing my patience with my 4-year-old at times that, he's just being 4 and there's nothing I can do he's not going to change. He's only 4, right? But I'm losing my patience with him in unnecessary times. So what are some behavior changes? Some of you, again, have already put that in the chat along with what we've already been talking about, but what are some behavior changes? Somebody said not able to focus. What else? What are some short-tempered? You become introverted. Bob and Sandy, I'm going to have to think that maybe you are extroverted in your personality, you become introverted. I have that as well. I'm very extroverted. And when I need to practice my self-care or I start experiencing depression, I become very introverted. Lazy. Yeah, I experience that as well. I also emotionally eat. Yes, that are some that's some severe behavioral things that I have to be very cognizant about is my eating patterns. Procrastination. Yeah, missing deadlines. You also could have like shopping, right? Are you binge shopping? That could be something to think about when we talk about behavior. These are all changes, right? These are all signs that maybe you need to talk about self-care and thinking about self-care. And so when we talk about, you might hear Michelle says quiet or want to vent. Yeah, they're definitely opposites, but they definitely both can apply here. So these are some cliches that we hear. You can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself first. Put your oxygen mask on first. And my personal favorite for all of us out there, I think we would all agree, you wouldn't let this happen to your phone. So don't let this happen to yourself either, right? And I think that some people look at these, I teach classes like these, or when I talk about self-care to my own family, who I've been doing this work with for, not this work with them, but doing this work for 15 plus years and, more so focused as not a therapist for the past 3 years, talking about self-care and suicide prevention and awareness. it's been difficult, right? They still view these things as cliches. They still say, you can pour from an empty cup. You have to sometimes, or, you sometimes have to just take care of somebody else. But these are all absolutely true, right? You have to take care of yourself first, or you're not going to be able to be the best that you can be or take care of somebody else first. So, when we're tying it back to you are the caregiver, I have seen so many caregivers get so burnt out that it makes them ill, or it makes them, unable to care for the person they're caregiving for, because they were unable to take that short time away. And we're going to talk about things that you can implement into your self-care plan, and where you can get resources, because it's so important. You just need to find the time. We could make every excuse in the book for why we can't find that self-care time, but I've just seen time and time again, people get burnt to the ground because of being a caregiver. And we really need to just focus on what can we do, right? Not all the things that we can't do, but what can we do? So yes, these are cliches, but these are so true. And self-care, I'm just the biggest advocate for self-care. My son was really sick when he was born, and we have still struggled with things up until the age of 4. He's not as sick as he was, but self-care has been a high priority for me since he's been born. And people don't understand why, right? They think that I should just dedicate 24/7 to him, and don't understand why I take time for myself. And it's because I wouldn't be able to care for him as good as I do if I didn't take time for myself. Right? So you get more done in a day, right? You are able to focus more, right? You have a healthier immune system, right? We talked about the physical link and the self-care, right? Being healthier mentally makes you have a healthier lifestyle physically. And several months ago, I, like everybody else, that the sickness, you all can probably attest, the sickness has been running through your home or your city or your friends' homes and households rampantly. And I was sick for like 6 weeks in a row. And, I'd gone to the urgent care, and they were like, you're fine, and I have epilepsy that is actually kind of linked to my mental health, but as an aside. And I felt as if I was going to have a seizure, and I did not have one, thankfully, but I said, you know what, it's time for me to go to the doctor about this illness that won't go away. And I was able to get some treatment and some medication, because I said, I don't want my physical health to be compromised over this lingering cough and cold that, I was feeling good enough to work and feeling, I didn't have anything. I didn't have COVID. I didn't have pneumonia. I didn't have bronchitis, but this cough wouldn't go away. And so, some people in the chat said, that they were missing deadlines. I've experienced that myself. So you're able to get more done in a day. And then hopefully, you get some alone time if you practice self-care. We all just need some alone time. Even us extroverts, I'm such an extrovert, over the top sometimes, I've been told, but we all just need that alone time to recharge, aside from our self-care. And then it's a safer environment for everybody. Just prior to this, I was telling Paul that I was speaking at another event, and it was a safety event they asked me to come and be a part of. And they had done grain bin safety before this, before my talk. And, I was just thankful to be involved, right? Because your mental health is so linked to your physical concentration. And some people talked about that, right? That they feel like they can't concentrate. And so thinking about taking care of somebody else, right? If you're responsible for giving out medication, or, helping them walk, or, bathing them, or things like that, or making sure if they still farm with some kind of disability, keeping them safe while they're out doing farming chores, that can be dangerous if you are not able to concentrate as well. And we struggle together to see professionals, right? and some of the reasons why. Some of these reasons might be new to you on this call. You might be on this webinar to just learn some new things, right? We lack access to healthcare and mental health care, right? We have 1 in 5 people struggle with some kind of mental health challenge, not necessarily disorder, but challenge in their lifetime. But we know that access to mental health care providers in our rural communities is going down every single year. That's going down, right? Or people are coming from, the urban and suburban areas to the rural communities, and they're not really quite understanding the rural lifestyle. Gloria put language barriers as well. Absolutely. Yes, there is a huge language barrier. Health literacy challenges and understanding. A lot of people don't understand healthcare, what your insurance offers, how to figure it out. I struggle with mine, and I even have somebody that I can call. Helpers are so busy that they don't often seek help for themselves. You are absolutely right. That is right. That's tied into this time and this distance and this cost, right? If you are taking care of somebody else who has the time, it's 40 minutes for me to go to an actual therapy office. So I do mine remotely. I do my telehealth, but my therapist is telehealth. So, if you decide to go in person, who has time to go 40 minutes one way to do an hour visit to then go another 40 minutes back home when you're trying to help somebody, right? The cost, if you're struggling with your healthcare understanding and knowing what your insurance covers, then the cost could be outrageous and you don't even know it, or your healthcare could cover it and you don't even know it, right? And then our technology limitations. So I shared with you that I do mine on telehealth. Some of us may be able to do telehealth and not realize we could do it. My dad is getting ready to do his first telehealth visit for the first time in 2 weeks, I think. He's so nervous about it, right? Because people don't know how to do it. It's really easy once you get the hang of it. And it's better than nothing, right? It can be uncomfortable and kind of nervous at first. He's doing like just a healthcare provider, a rheumatologist, but it can be unnerving at first, especially with a mental health care provider, right? A therapist or somebody. But there could be lack of broadband in your area. And so that might not be an option. Our local library does have like Wi-Fi spots for you to just go in the parking lot, but that still might be a 40-minute drive for you. Michelle put, it's just a little sugar. It's just a little blood pressure. Absolutely. That is a struggle that we struggle together with. And this is part, Michelle, of the stigma that we're talking about, right? Everybody knows everybody when we think about that. When we think about in our rural communities, when we think about us as caregivers, there's caregiver support networks. And sometimes even in those caregiver support networks, if you do them virtually or in person, that takes up time, which is a form of self-care, but sometimes you might need a little bit more. But everybody knows everybody and nobody wants to share, hey, I need to practice more self-care, or I'm struggling with my mental health, or, I'm more irritable than I was 2 weeks ago because this is going on, or Jim, isn't getting something approved through his insurance that really needs to get approved because insurance is like ridiculous. I struggle with things for my son that it's like, okay, last month this was approved, this medication. Why is it not approved this month? I'm sure that many of you can echo that same sentiment. But everybody knows everybody. And so it's like, I feel like I can't go to see somebody. We have the stigma of I can take care of myself, right? But you all are on this call, which is a great encouragement to me that you realize that, hey, I don't have to have this mentality, right? I don't have to have these stigmas, there's too much to do. Yeah, there's so much to do. And I think there's value in saying that out loud. Like, yes, there is too much to do. But where can I take the time to say, I need to do this for me? And we're going to talk about some ways that we can work on in a self-care plan that can kind of get you started. Everybody's self-care plan is going to look a little bit different. But when I was doing this in service this morning, and I was kind of sitting and listening, and I don't farm. We do live on 31 acres of timber. So somebody else does the heavy lifting for us. And my husband does work with farmers at NRCS, but I can't speak to all the farm work that has to be done, right? But, luckily this person that was speaking before me had shared, that there are times that farmers could, if they really truly wanted to find time to get off the farm, right? Or take some time to themselves. It's kind of very similar to what I try to do, right? I try, even if it's once a week, to get up a half hour earlier. I am not a morning person, so I don't want to get up early. It's just not my thing. And so, do I go to bed later so I can do some of my self-care? It's about being intentional about certain things, but recognizing those stigmas and saying them out loud. And so self-care as a resource, right? When we talk about resources for the caregivers, this is one of the things I want you to take away, right? Because sometimes we know that resources are lacking in our rural communities. And so self-care is one form of a resource if you're in a pinch and there's nothing else available to you that you can fall back on. So I love this graphic. You could just take something like this and you could just make your own. So this is just a simple, you could even make like a circle and take a piece of paper, you could make it like nice and laminate it if you want, and then write it on a dry erase with a dry erase marker, or however you want to do it. I mean, like if you use a Cricut, like my mother-in-law uses a Cricut, and so everything's labeled and everything's like out of control now. She's become Cricut crazy. But however you want to do it, I am not like a really crafty person, but I always like dream of being it. But this is really cool because it's things you can control and things you can't control. And I think it's really important as caregivers to be able to voice those things, right? So there are some things that you can control, right? You can control your thoughts. You can control your efforts, right? You can find creative solutions. You can control your words, your decisions, and whether you take self-care or do self-care or not. I think when we think about your efforts or your decisions as a caregiver, you need to decide, can I let somebody else come in an hour a week? Is there anybody else I can lean on for 45 minutes a week? Do I have a family member? Do I have a friend? Do I have the money to have somebody come in, a paid person, if I don't have any friends or family, right? Because some people don't have the luxury of having family or friends close. Do I have somebody from a church group or a school group or the senior center or a farm family friend or whoever that is that could come for 45 minutes a week? Like I said, I have seen caregivers that have refused to let people come in and spend any time. And it's just devastated their physical and mental health because they were unwilling to let people come in. But you can't control your effort, your decisions. Is it worth it to spend 45 minutes a month to yourself, right? Things you can't control, right? You can't control your circumstances. Easier said than done, right? You can't control the cards that were dealt to you. You can't control what other people say, what other people's words are. Again, easier said than done, but just voicing it, recognizing it, writing it down, sometimes that helps. And then other people's actions. So if somebody does something that hurts you, that offends you, right? If somebody says something about you as the caregiver, you can't control what they say, but you can control what you say back or your thoughts. And you can't control what other people think of you, but you can't control what you think of them in your words. And then you can't control the outcome of your efforts, right? So maybe you ask somebody to come and sit for 45 minutes, and then the outcome, doesn't work out. And they say, you know what, I'm not willing to come back. You can't control that. And that's okay. but you tried, right? And, I think the other thing to really think of is us deciding, what we want to include in our self-care plan, right? So we want to identify who you can talk to and be intentional with, right? So do you want to talk to a close family member or friend who knows the situation, knows what you're going through as a caregiver, who may not be necessarily unbiased, who has their own opinions that you don't necessarily agree with, who you could kind of get into butt heads with, right? Or do you want somebody completely removed from the situation, right? So identify who you can talk with, that circle of people. There might be multiple people, there might only be one person. And be intentional when you talk to them, right? Talk a while with them. Don't just often in a while. Don't just say, well, I'll call them when I need to call them, right? Call them once a week, call them once a month. Find something you can enjoy that can be as short as 10 minutes a day. What is it? Is it reading a book? Is it walking around your house or your property for 10 minutes a day? Is it, doing some stretches? Is it doing some, knee bends? Is it doing some squats while you're sitting watching television? Is it watching television? Right? Is it having a little bit of ice cream? I'm not against food. Trust me, I'm not against food. You can only see my head up, which is nice. But, there are no bad foods. There's just things that we should have in moderation. So find something that you can enjoy on your own for 10 minutes a day. If it has to be 10 minutes a month, then it has to be 10 minutes a month. Lean on family and friends if you have them. Not everybody has them, right? And I understand that. Use technology when you can, because I think this goes hand in hand, right? Avoid social media and news at the same time, right? So it sounds like contradictory. So I'll just tell you, being a caregiver to my son, I use technology to have support groups. He has a congenital heart defect. So I'm in like a lot of support groups for kids with congenital heart defects. But it's a double-edged sword, right? Because when we lose somebody in that community to their congenital heart defect, it breaks my heart. It's really hard for me because my son is doing so well at this point in time, and knowing that could always be him at any point, right? But the support groups outweigh the times that make me feel sad. The support groups that I found on Facebook have really supported me and got me through some times that were really difficult, and answered a lot of questions for me. And so sometimes, that's the answer. But avoiding social media and news, if it's frustrating you, if it's annoying you, remember those cues that you had said, right? The signs that you're feeling stressed. So like when the pandemic was really bad and everybody was polarized by everything, I just stopped. I said, I can't do it anymore. So I was done with the news. I still am done with the news. I don't watch it. People ask me, have you heard about this? No, I haven't, because I just don't watch the news anymore. It's too much stress for me. I can't handle it. I don't want to know about it. So I'm on social media some, so I hear some things. But you have to know what stresses you out, right? And what triggers your anxiety or depression or both. And social media and the news does that for me. And so I want to talk to you about what are some things that have been created in your community and the rural communities. So this is more strictly for Ohio. So if you know anybody, I know this is a national webinar, but if you know anybody that lives in Ohio, we have this county resource guide. We also have there in any community, there are probably local county crisis lines. You can look up your local drug and alcohol recovery board. So if you live in Ohio, you can go to this website and it will link you up with your local drug and alcohol recovery board. It will also link you to any local county crisis lines. But if you live in another state, if you and you have access to the internet, which most of you probably do, if you're here on this call, you can just simply Google, right? What's my local county hotline, right? My mental health hotline, or, local county mental health guide. You could also reach out to your local extension offices in your state, because so many, I'm in the North Central region. So what Paul was talking about, I'm in the North Central region. So many of my colleagues in the states in the North Central region are doing great things surrounding rural and farm stress. It's amazing. But we have created this farm stress certified program where we in Ohio and many others are also in other states in the North Central region are doing trainings for mental health professionals to help them understand the unique stressors that the rural and farming community has. And so it's really just been a great program to help them better understand. And I know that there's a lot of other states in the North Central region that are doing that. And I'm sure that there are other states across the Far Sand community that are doing this. And don't forget to look up for telehealth. So, I live in a rural community, like I shared, but I get telehealth through Franklin County, which is Columbus, Ohio, if you're familiar with Columbus, Ohio. We're going to talk, I saw the 988. We're going to talk about 988 here in just a minute. So this is state, but kind of mixed with other resources. So our farm stress website here is on here. And then of course the AgrAbility website, this is Ohio's AgrAbility. And then there's also the Center for Rural Affairs, which is for all of the United States, the Center for Rural Affairs, which is a really great resource. And then some resources in your state that you can always look up is the Rural Health Association. They really work to serve underserved populations, communities that, don't have the healthcare access that our metro and suburban populations have. And then any of your state Department of Agriculture's, they work in conjunction, especially right now, with the Far Sand networks. So we had a grant last year with our Ohio Department of Agriculture, and we worked on that program that I was talking to you about educating mental health professionals. And so many states and many state Department of Agricultures are working on providing mental health resources for the rural and agriculture communities. Any kind of agribusiness association, look at newspapers. We have Farm and Dairy, which spans Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia. And then there is the Iowa State University, Iowa Concern Line. It is geared for farmers and ranchers, but it covers the whole country. It's not just Iowa. It's a 24-hour hotline, but it's geared for farmers and ranchers. And you can, of course, take that number down. And then the 988 number that was talked about in the chat. This is by far my most favorite resource that we have that I think is especially great for caregivers who struggle to get away from the farm or the family or the person that they're caregiving for, because it gives them the opportunity to talk to somebody. So if you haven't heard of 988, it replaces the 1-800, the old 1-800 suicide prevention lifeline. So if you remember the big long 1-800 line that you could call if you were in a suicide crisis situation, and a licensed trained professional would answer the phone. This is the same exact thing, but it enhances it because it's an easier to remember number. It's just 988 now, very similar to 911. And now you can call if you're not only experiencing a suicide crisis, but you can also call it if you are experiencing a mental health emergency. So if you are feeling depression, anxiety, any kind of out of control emotions, whatever it looks like to you, whenever you feel overwhelmed or, like you just need to talk to somebody, think about on a spectrum of things, right? So sometimes we are a 1 and we're doing really great. And, we're not feeling any kind of like mental health distress. And then 10, right, being all the way out there, you need that like continuous support. You could be a 5 on that scale and just say, hey, I need to talk to somebody. 988 is so great for our rural and agriculture communities and those that are caregivers, because you could call. It's completely anonymous as long as you have cell phone service, and you never have to leave the person that you're caring for. And they will answer the phone 24 hours a day, 365, like they said in the chat. And it's completely anonymous and it's answered by licensed trained professionals. And you can call as many times as you want. The goal is for it to be eventually like 911 in terms of support for if, somebody needs immediate care. But, if you feel like, well, I'm not sure if I should call 988 or 911, if you call 988, they will make the determination to call 911 and they'll just like link you over to that. Like they'll transfer you. So they have that ability. So don't feel like, I don't know who to call, what to call. You can call 988. You could call 988 with a friend or family member. And I did hear that recently about you could press 1 after dialing 988 for veterans and service members. I did not know that until recently. So if you dial 988 and then you dial 1 right after, it will give you to somebody that specializes in that. So I've not done that yet. I'm not sure about that. So I've heard that though. So also, you can text 988 if you're more comfortable just texting, and you can chat 988. So chatting online. So calling and texting is only available in English and Spanish, but if you chat it online, it's available in like 250 languages. So that's a little bit of the few disadvantages to 988 at this point. But they're working every day to get it as close to 911 as possible. And hopefully it'll be exactly like 911 in the near future. But I just really love 988 because it's available to anybody, anywhere that has cell service. It's my favorite thing for caregivers, for caregiving. Okay. So just a few educational programs. I know I'm getting kind of short on time that I want to get to you through to you. If you're thinking, I might want some extra support or learn some more information, that I might have, some friends or family members I'm kind of concerned about. So we have a few trainings that OSU Extension offers, particularly right now for free, but I'm sure if you go to your local extension office or your local drug and alcohol recovery board, or wherever you go or have heard about for mental health resources, they might know some information about it. They probably will be able to guide you somewhere. And like I said, a lot of the people in our network are teaching these at the different extension universities that I work with in the Farsian network. But we have QPR, which is Question, Persuade, Refer. It is a 2-hour crisis intervention, how to support somebody going through a suicide crisis situation. This is a great class if you only have a short amount of time. The problem that I run into is that people want to know how to support somebody before the crisis situation happens, right? How do I prevent the crisis situation from happening? And so that's where I lean more towards mental health first aid in terms of how do you support somebody. And you can scan the QR code on the screen to learn more about it, to sign up for a class that we have. We have virtual classes going on every month. But mental health first aid, if you've not heard of it, you learn in the class a 5-step action plan, which will prepare you to respond to those facing related to mental health concerns. So it walks you through how to support somebody going through a mental health challenge in the early stages and the early warning signs and symptoms, and then how to respond as they get worse until it becomes a crisis situation. and then how you can support somebody in a crisis situation. I just feel like it's the most all encompassing. I realize it does take time. It's about a 5-hour training. So it does take time away from you, caregiving for, your spouse or your friend or your family member, but it is invaluable, not only to your mental health, but to the mental health of people around you. So we do offer those virtually if that's the only option you have, but we also do offer them in person. And so just a couple of things. The next topic, I'm almost done, but I wanted to share real quickly is I wanted to give you some warning signs of potential suicide as part of this caregiver network, right? Somebody said that I saw briefly that they're in a church support group. You might know other people even on this call that you talk to outside of this that are in a support together, right? And as part of your self-care plan, I hope you've identified people, but just some warning signs. So if this is something that is kind of uncomfortable to you, please, end the call or, but these are just some things that I want you to be aware of, to look for in people that are around you, because you never know when you might need to be somebody that needs to reach out and call 988 for somebody. So you might hear any of these at any given time, but you might hear somebody say simply, I'm going to kill myself. You might hear somebody say, don't be surprised if I die in a tractor rollover. You might hear somebody say, if you foreclose, you'll be seeing my obituary next week. You could hear, if I should pass away, I want you to have my old Winchester 12 gauge. You might hear somebody say, if I die, can my mother have my life insurance policy? So these are all things that I want you to be aware of, because you never know when you might need that to say, hey, I'm concerned about you. Can we call 988 together? And in mental health first aid or in QPR, we talk more about how we can support you and the person that may be exhibiting these warning signs. So I am all done. I just wanted to wrap up with, what questions do you have?
You're still muted, Paul.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Bridget, for all that excellent information. We do have some time for questions. I think Ed Sheldon's going to be leading that part, so I'll turn things over to Ed, and I think he may want to share his screen.
I'm not going to worry about that. My computer's being a little clunky today, and I'm not even going to ask for that.
Okay.
Nuisance, and Bridget's caught most of the stuff that came across the chat anyway. But we did have a couple questions come in, and then if anybody has any others, please shoot them at us in the chat. But first question, Ed, and I think you may have covered it, but it certainly bears repeating. At what point does a lack of self-care mean that you need to seek professional intervention?
I think that, you're never going to really, I think you're not really going to really know when the lack of self-care gets to a point where you need to seek intervention, until really truly it becomes a physical issue, right? I'll just share my own personal journey, right? So I said I have epilepsy, and I was in a very stressful situation when I was in graduate school, and I just kind of kept pushing things down. And I was newly married, and we didn't have any money, and we were living in California, which is like the most expensive state in the whole entire world that you could live in, right? And we just kept pushing everything down and just thinking that jobs would happen and blah, 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 right? And finally, I had a seizure. I never had one in my life. And that was just a wake-up call for me. I met with my doctor, and he couldn't figure out why I was having them. And then we moved back home. I live in Ohio, like I said. And when I moved back home, I met with somebody at the Cleveland Clinic who is my doctor here. And he said, Bridget, you could have went your whole life. He did find a genetic condition, but he was like, you could have went your whole life without having a seizure. But stress is literally what induced your seizure. He said, you just got so much. And I hear story after story of people that have shared, this physical ailment is what caused me to realize that my mental health was what was being left unchecked. For women, it could be, different female issues or, whatever, or for men, it could be, male issues or heart attacks or whatever. People want to try to not link physical health to mental health, and they're so extremely linked together that people don't realize it until it's too late. And then once you, of course, meet the immediate need of the mental or the physical health, then you can go back and say, okay, like, yes, I am on epilepsy medicine, but when I don't take care of my mental health, I start to feel a seizure coming on, or I start to feel like, okay, I'm not taking care of myself. Right. And so I think that that's when you realize, like, okay, it's time to get my mental health under control.
Very well put. From my personal, I have my own personal experiences. So yeah, sometimes it takes some of us twice or three times to learn. But
Absolutely.
Okay. Another question we had: do you have advice for a layperson, whether that's a family member, a coworker, a friend, and for bringing up mental health issues with someone who appears to be in denial? And I know that kind of ties in with the 988 conversation, but share your opinion there.
Yeah. So I would say, take mental health first aid. That's going to help you a lot with talk, right? So mental health first aid is really going to help you talk to somebody who give you tips and ideas of how to talk to somebody who isn't ready to talk about it, right? I can't go into like all of the things right now, but I would say just a couple of things. The person is not going to be ready for treatment or, any kind of conversation until they're ready. It's just how it is with anything, right? I'm not ready to lose weight until I'm ready to lose weight, right? I'm not ready to stop drinking until I'm ready to stop drinking. You're not going to force me to do it. I think some things that you could lay the groundwork with, and this is what we do in mental health first aid. So I'll just very briefly say, you can say things like, I'm here for you. I care about you. I've noticed a change in X, Y, and Z, whatever, your health, your wellness, or, if you're a farmer, I've noticed a change of this on your farm. I'm here for you whenever you're ready to talk, right? Constantly letting them know, I'm here for you. I care about you. Because if they're in denial, that means they're totally not ready, but when they want to be ready, when they are ready, they might come to you first because they know that you were the person that acknowledged them and that you said that you were here for them when they were ready, and to not be judgmental when they're ready to talk. I think that's what we talk about a lot in mental health first aid. That's the 3-minute version of mental health first aid.
It's all right. I don't know if you see your chat screen. We had kind of a follow-up regarding this question, and I'd also encourage you to look into motivational interviewing. So if somebody would, curious to know what that term means.
Motivational interviewing, I mean, they can unmute too, but motivational interviewing, the way I know it is, it's a therapeutic term, as a way to interview somebody. When I would be doing therapy, you could also do strengths-based approaches, right? Talking about somebody's strengths, right? Like, I know you work really hard, you have overcome so much. But if Remington wants to speak to, what they meant by that, please feel free to unmute or type more in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, feel free to jump in, Remington, if you'd like to share more. In the meantime, I'll look ahead a little bit. Really, I think that was the questions that we had. We did have a couple interesting comments, which I think with the one about the 988, you did a great job explaining that. And then also a little follow up to that one was that you dial 1 is for specialized support for veterans or service members, and that takes you to the closest VA, and you don't necessarily have to be enrolled. You don't have to be enrolled for follow-up care. So And then about that same time, we had a question or a comment come in about if for folks working with amputees, the Amputee Association's website has a limb loss resource center that can be of assistance. So that definitely of interest to some of the AgrAbility folks on here, I'm sure. So
Yeah.
Let's see, and then another comment that just came in. It looks like this pharmacist always encourages mental health patients who are prescribed medication the importance of compliance. Any thoughts to add to that? I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah, no, Dick, if you're a pharmacist or if you're talking about just pharmacists in general, I'd 100% agree with that. If your medicine says take it every day, you take it every day.
Well, if we don't have anything else, we'll turn it back over to Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Ed. And thanks again, Bridget, for all your excellent information. Thank you to everybody that participated today, especially participating in the chat with all your comments and responses. Again, we do request that you would please visit our post-webinar survey, and I'll put that in there one more time in case you didn't see it, and just give us a minute or two of feedback, which is very helpful to us. We have these North Central Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Center webinars every quarter. So if you signed up for this one, you'll be getting information about our next one. That's not been scheduled or planned yet, but we hope to do that in the near future. So again, thank you everybody for your participation. Thank you, Bridget, and we wish you a good rest of the day.